right, right. Yeah, and that's what I told Pat. I wasn't going to apologize because it's been 21 years and we still ain't got that Pootie Tang sequel. All I want to see is Lance Crothers say Sadate one more time. That's it. Hey, hold on. Never mind that. Welcome back to the show, and I hope you guys enjoy this show because I enjoyed making this one. I just want to ask you once again to like, subscribe, and share. Today's special is Anti-Intellectualism, brought to you by the good old US of A. So you've probably noticed it too, this air of defiance to anyone that knows something. Anytime someone is presented as an expert in a field or has a title before their name, they get ignored at best and harassed at worst. At some point, as a society, logic and reason gave way to emotion. This wasn't always the case though. The US used to have brilliant people from all walks of life, from George Washington Carver to Thomas Edison to Marie Van Britten Brown. Hedy Lamarr, a celebrity, invented a frequency hopping system for torpedoes that probably would have helped a lot during World War II if the Navy wasn't hating on her. And she's Austrian. Her people, Austrians, were the ops. Had I been around back then during the war, I'd be breathing down her neck, but I got trust issues. The point I'm making is that the US used to have a great tradition of thinkers. Different races, genders, and nationalities all helped push society forward with the power of the idea. However, that drive has been whittled down to a handful of guys that everyone hates. So what we're here to figure out is where things went left on us. From my observation, there are a couple of issues. The first reason is pretty simple. Thinking is hard. I know that the concept is simple, but the action is harder than you'd well think. The APA definition is cognitive behavior in which ideas, images, mental representations, and other hypothetical elements of thought are experienced or manipulated. In this sense, thinking includes imagining, remembering, problem solving, daydreaming, free association, concept formation, and many other processes. Mind you, and I promise I'm not doing that on purpose, this definition is a lot longer, but look at what goes into it. What it comes down to is, to seriously think about something is to deconstruct it. You have to treat it like an ogre and examine the layers. The trouble is, and believe me, this can take you down a long and at times unwanted rabbit hole. Conceptual deconstruction is such a unique ability that if you review history, only two groups have possessed it: philosophers and comedians. Philosophers are obvious. If you read the works of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, all their works are just them breaking down the world around them. I've heard it said that philosophy was a precursor to what we know to be science, and science is really just the study of nature. Studying brings us back to deconstructing. The part where you may be looking at me or the screen sideways is when I mention comedians, and yes, they are the closest things we have to philosophers today. That's at least true for the greats like Richard Pryor and George Carlin. A perfect example of this is Richard Pryor's bit about his time in Africa. For the sake of time and to not ruin such a funny bit, seriously, it's funny no matter what generation you're in, I won't go into all of it. However, in the bit, he makes a reference to the N-word and how when he was in Africa, he never used the word. This may be surprising given how much he used the word in his act, but without saying it, he's making a very powerful point. In a place where he's no longer the other, he stops behaving as such. This may be a matter of interpretation on my part, but he's explaining how our environment affects our consciousness. This is a very powerful observation about humanity and our behaviors, and the layperson may reject it being said plainly because it's high concept. However, through the use of humor and making the realization personal, he's able to convey it in an easily digestible way. He also slips it into your unconscious, which is a powerful way to impart wisdom, as that tends to stick with us. What clouds this to many today is what comedies become through the rise of social media. Most of the comedy we see today, outside of the true greats who tend to be Gen X and young boomers, is insult humor. Admittedly, this is a genre of comedy, but before the past decade, that's all it was. You'd see it in comics that specialized in it or in others that would sprinkle it into their act. Even then, there was usually a point to it. However, if you examine social media comedy or the comedians that rose through social media, that's their brand of comedy. I'm not going into too much detail on that last point because I'm going to talk about it a few more times on this channel, but it's no surprise that comedy de-evolved as anti-intellectualism rose. A big issue here is that our society doesn't really promote intelligence as a quality and barely as an effective tool. Outside of true passion, people tend to strive for upward mobility. However, academia is never presented as a pathway for that goal. Even if you see intellectuals on TV, no one ever mentions their net worth. Neil deGrasse Tyson and Bill Nye are each multimillionaires, but you never hear about that. Even Kim Kardashian, I think I've only ever heard her work towards being a lawyer mentioned once, and that was when she passed the baby bar in California. These are not isolated examples. We continuously ignore anything academic, no matter how practical it can be to building wealth. To further the point, things that are promoted as upward mobility paths, athletics and entertainment, have a lot of intellectual aspects to them. I played football in high school and a little in college. There are a lot of things that are going on at once during one play. You have to remember the play. You got to remember where you need to be and when. What happens if the play was wrong or if the other team figures it out. You also have to understand the person you're competing against and their abilities as opposed to yours. Mind you, I haven't even mentioned practice, game planning, weight training, conditioning, nutrition, all things that require a great deal of thought. However, these aspects of sports are never mentioned. I have ideas on why this happened. However, to go into them would change this into a different video, which to my point earlier is what thinking does to you. However, these issues lead to another problem, which is that people just don't listen. You've probably experienced this phenomena yourself in your daily life. This causes a number of issues regarding the exchange of ideas. It stops it. There are a couple of reasons why this is. The first issue is that people take everything as a personal attack. Here's some homework. Go to any social media platform and people watch. Notice how many times someone says something innocuous only to be insulted. You also see people give an innocuous response only for the first person to insult them. No one wants to be challenged, even lightly. Part of this is ego. One of the fundamental issues with people is that our egos are too small. I know that this is counter to what society teaches us, things like putting our ego to the side, and not to go into too much detail as this is something I'm going to touch on later in this channel. Essentially, this causes a bit of an adverse effect on people. It causes people to be a bit fragile, and that fragility intensifies challenge to the point of a perceived attack. Once this happens, emotions take over and the person draws their blades instead of examining their ideas and beliefs. What's happened is that the realm of ideas is no longer a place to improve. It's now a battleground. And like any battleground, anyone that walks them is looking to beat the other person. Every question is now a loaded question. Every weakness in logic is an opportunity to attack. No one's a teacher and/or student. We're all soldiers trying to bring home a victory. And it doesn't matter how pointless the victory may be. This leads into the second issue of group thinking. Group thinking is either the symptom or cause of the tribalism that's infected our culture currently. If you remember Men in Black, there is a famous scene where Kay points out how one person can be reasonable, but people aren't. That used to be the case, but because of social media, and that's not to blame social media inherently, that pack mentality has extended itself. Just like how people carry a library that they don't use in their pockets, they carry their tribe with them also. Because of this, whenever one of those people that suffer from small egos feels attacked, they can retreat into the safety of their group. What this means is that no one feels the need to be able to defend their thinking because they always have backup. You may think that you're asking someone a simple question, but you're now unwittingly arguing with every person that's ever agreed with them. Furthermore, they never have a reason to question anything or attempt to grow in any way. They're in an intellectual utopia from their point of view. There's a third person here, and that's a different animal altogether, and that's the contrarian. You know what? I'm gonna get emotional here. All right, I'm getting emotional here because I hate the contrarian. They're terrible people. They don't add anything to the conversation. Their whole goal is really just to disagree with you. If you see one, don't even engage. Just take off. Ignore them. If you can, make their life hell. I'm moving on. Any damn way. So the question is, how do we get past this? How do we get to a point where thinking isn't seen as some great evil? Well, there's a few ways to get this done, but it's going to take both sides and a lot of good faith, for lack of a better term. Starting with the intellectuals. The first thing is to not big time people. No one wants to be talked down to, and like with other qualities such as beauty, physical strength, and wealth, no one likes it when you're flaunting it, no matter how satisfying it may be to do so. Ensure that the person is receptive to the information. No one, not even the most brilliant of us, are constantly in the mood to be schooled. Make sure that there's a rapport between you and the other person. Make sure that the topic came up organically. Essentially, read the room. Learn to respectfully check for understanding. A simple "if that makes sense" every so often can go a long way to keeping the conversation flowing. The more that you and the other person are on the same page, the less likely misunderstandings have the chance to become offenses. As mentioned before, one offense can start something that was never intended. More to the point, understand how to change up how you convey information. People are varied, which means that the way they receive information varies as well. Furthermore, one mode of information reception isn't better than the other. If the person isn't learning by you just talking to them, feel free to use examples, imaging, or On the other hand, if you're not an intellectual, you have things to work on as well. For one, understand that not knowing or not knowing as much isn't a bad thing. We all come from different walks of life, which means that we all inherently possess greater and lesser amounts of knowledge regarding different subjects. Enjoy the learning and accept it for the personal growth that it is. Also, understand that not everything's a personal attack just because it comes out of left field. Let the other person know that you're not following them because they may just have a problem with their conveyance as opposed to you with your interpretive skills. Once they know to change up the delivery, the exchange can become easier. The bottom line here is, while you have to be intelligent to be an intellectual, you don't have to be an intellectual to be intelligent. We have to get back to a point where we embrace knowledge and once again see its pursuit as a noble endeavor. Knowledge helps everyone everywhere. There's nothing that benefits you in your life that didn't have to either be discovered or studied to find its practical applications. Once we get back to that point, we can get back on course and do things the right way.